Howdy, folks. So about 4 months ago, I picked up this phone, which is a Doogee X5S. I bought this on eBay. This came direct from China, and it cost a whopping 60 US dollars. Now, I have no idea what the cost of this phone is now, but that's at least what it was when I bought it. I'll put a link in the description with some keywords so you can do a search for it if you're interested. So this, of course, is an incredibly cheap direct from China phone. My daily driver phone is an LG G4. It was about $700 off contract if I were to buy it when I got it. So this thing is literally less than 10 times the cost, and you get it outright. So I mean, it's very, very inexpensive. And the thing is, this is actually not the cheapest of the cheap phones. This is actually one of the higher end cheap phones. You can get them a lot cheaper than this, but I bought this one because it has some better specs than some of the cheapest phones. And I bought this not because I needed a new phone, of course. I bought this because I just wanted to see what it was like. What kind of quality should I expect? What kind of performance would I expect? And the other thing is, it's just a cool thing to have because there's a lot of uses you can put an old Android phone to, even if it doesn't have a SIM card, even if it doesn't have data connection. Because of course you've got Wi-Fi, you've got Bluetooth, you've got those things. And I want to talk about what I'm actually using this thing for at the end of the video. So I'm going to split this video into two parts. The first part's going to be a review, and then I'm going to put a link in the description and probably a time code here where you can skip to where I take this thing apart. I have not yet done that. I don't know what's inside this, so I'm going to be taking it apart first time on camera. I just want to see what's inside. I mean, we know what's inside, but I want to see the kind of quality and how they've done the everything. They've done the systems design, how they laid it out inside. That's the kind of stuff I want to look at. So anyway, I've had this for about 4 months. I planned this video for a long time ago, and I never got to it. I've been really busy. So, that was a good thing because it gave me enough time to sort of use it over a long period of time, see if it failed, infant mortality, that kind of thing. So, I think it's okay with me waiting this long. The super quick, you don't want to watch the whole video, but you need to know about this phone. For the price, I think it is absolutely more than fair. I think it is it's surprising. It really is surprising what you can get for that kind of cost. I mean, it does not have all the bells and whistles of a modern sort of, what we'd sort of be used to as a phone in North America, but it's definitely worth the money. And I mean, even if you're not using it for a phone, if you're using it for an Internet of Things project or something like that, you cannot get even half of the parts in this phone for the cost of the entire phone. It's just all of the R&D is going into phone parts, and so the parts for phones are just so cheap when you compare them to all the rest of the stuff. Like if I wanted to buy that kind of screen but not for a phone, it would probably cost me more than $60 outright. I mean, it's ridiculous. And the screen is the big reason why this thing costs as much money as it does, and that's because this is a 1280 by 720, so it's a 720p HD screen. Let me just unlock the phone off camera so you don't see my pin. And anyway, this screen is, perfectly fine. I don't really understand the whole let's put 4K screens in phones because seriously, I don't understand it. I didn't want one of the really low resolution phones that a lot of the Chinese cheap phones are, because of course those phones they advertise them as QHD, which is supposed to mean quad HD, but of course in Chinese terms that means quarter HD, and it's actually a little bit better than VGA. They're horrible. But this one is truly 720, and this one, you can't see the pixels on this, so I really don't see the need to go any higher in resolution. I don't see the difference. And the thing is, the screen is actually the most expensive part in almost all phones, and as a result, that's why this thing costs $60 instead of less than that for the whole cheap phones. It's just because it has that kind of screen in it. I might as well get a decent screen, right? If I want to watch videos or whatever on this thing. So, let me go over what's on this phone. So, like I said, we have a 5-inch 720p HD screen. We have real off-screen buttons here. So we've got like the menu, home, and back. At the top there is, you won't be able to see it, but right here there is an infrared proximity sensor, so it knows when it's close to your face, and I believe there is that's used as also as an ambient light sensor. Anyway, we just have a speaker. There is a front-facing camera. The cameras on this are crap, as you sort of expect. After the screen, the next most expensive thing are the cameras. So, of course, they're going to cut the cost of the cameras. Now, they work fine. I mean, if you need to take pictures, they're fine. But they are like early 2000s cell phone quality, which I think nowadays the internet would call potato quality. But they do take pictures, right? So, I mean, they work in a pinch. Of course, the rear camera is substantially better than the front-facing camera, but the front-facing camera is not nearly as bad as I thought it would be. And I'll take some photos and I'll inset them so you can see what they look like. We have just a capacitive digitizer on the front. There is an option to leave that on all the time, so you can like do the like double tap or whatever, and the screen will come on. You don't have to use the buttons, but I disable that because I think it's a stupid feature. The power button is on this side. The volume control is on this side. There is nothing on the other side of the phone. And there is a microphone and a speaker port on the bottom of the phone. The speaker is... The one thing that you can kind of tell about this is just a speaker, and they're just sort of, whenever you play audio, it just goes out the speaker. Whereas with other phones, there's usually some sort of software that it knows the limitations of the speaker, and it filters the audio to try and reduce distortion. It's something not a lot of people know about. There is filtering in a lot of phones. This clearly doesn't have that, and you can clearly tell the speaker is trying to reproduce the full audio spectrum, and it does not do a great job of it. But again, what do you expect for this kind of a cost? If an $800 phone can't get a built-in speaker right, why would a $60 phone get it right either? On the top of the phone, we have the USB port and the headphone jack. So that's kind of the first strange thing, is that the USB port is on the top instead of on the bottom. And it's kind of annoying, but it's not a deal breaker. It is at least facing the right way though, which is good. And on the back, we have a flash, so it does have an LED flash, and then we just have the rear-facing camera, and there is nothing else on the back here. Now, to take the back off of this phone, it's just clipped on, and it's just a flimsy plastic back. But of course, what else does it need to be? It's just supposed to be thin. So, like all phones that come out of the Chinese market, it has dual SIM support. I have used the SIM card. I did manage to borrow a SIM card from a friend to test out the 4G capabilities in this phone. I should mention that as well. That's another reason why this thing is more expensive than the normal phones. Not only does it have the nice screen, but it also has 4G support, not just 3G. It is an LTE capable phone. We've got our battery here. They don't state the capacity on this, but I believe it is a 2.6 amp hour battery, which is not bad given this kind of a phone. And we have a micro SD card slot as well for memory expansion, which you're probably going to need because this thing only has 8 gigs of internal flash, and about half of that is used by the operating system. So you really have about 4 gigabytes of storage to install apps and music and videos and all that stuff on it. So you can clearly see up here in this corner you have an antenna, and there's another antenna down here, and there's another antenna right here. So my guess, if I remember correctly, was Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and 4G, but I may be wrong on that. I think when we take it apart, we'll figure out which antenna goes where. So yeah, I mean, the only kind of interesting thing is the buttons are actually built into the back case, so you actually can't push the buttons with the back off because there are no buttons. I mean, you have to actually get something pokey out and actually press the little dimples in there, which is kind of difficult to do if you don't have long nails. And it just snaps on like that. It's not as bad as it's not as bad a back as I would have expected. It doesn't. The plastic feels cheap, but it's actually a lot thicker and stronger than even the backs on my real phones, which they try to shave the plastic as thin as possible so that they make the phone as thin as possible. This thing is not. It's not designed to be uber thin. If I just compare it with my G4, it's about the same thickness. It's just my G4 is curved, so it looks thinner, but it's actually not thinner. This thing is kind of just a brick, and of course that doesn't surprise me. Now, one thing you'll notice is the screen is getting a little greasy, and I did clean this thing before I started the video, and the reason why it's greasy is because this is just a regular piece of plastic. There is no special like coating, oleophobic coating that repels oil on the front of this phone, so it will get oily, just like the very early smartphones did. And it did come with a screen protector, but I took that off because it was very sticky, and sliding and stuff was kind of hard, so I decided to just rip it off and use this, which is much more slippery, but of course you have this greasy problem, but whatever. So as for performance, it's actually pretty good. I was really quite surprised as to how well performing this thing really was. It's not the fastest phone by any stretch of the imagination. It is not the fastest phone, but I think for the cost, it's more than fast enough. I mean, if you were to buy this for like a child or something, if they throw it in the lake or whatever, you're not really that mad. I think it's great because it performs well, and that's great. It has Wi-Fi N, and the Wi-Fi works really well. So I've had no real issues with the wireless. The Bluetooth also works. It's got Bluetooth. I believe it's Bluetooth 4, but I may be wrong on that. It's been a long time since I've read the spec sheet on this phone. I'm making this video just because I happen to have a few hours of free time. The Bluetooth works fine. There are some interesting things with the USB support on this. It says in the sort of the official specs, which is basically whatever's in the YouTube listing, that it does not support USB on the go. And that makes sense, right? I mean, it's a cheap phone. So I decided I would actually try that and plug some stuff into this. And the specs are wrong. It does support USB on the go. So I plugged in some keyboard, mouse, flash drive. They all worked fine. So I also decided I would plug in my Seek thermal camera, which, like I've said multiple times, and I will always say this, do not buy those. They are terrible cameras. Buy a FLIR one instead. But I bought one before I knew that. And anyway, it does actually work in this. You could use this as a dedicated thermal camera viewer for one of those cameras because it just plugs in right here. And the USB port is facing the correct direction. However, the image will be upside down because, of course, this is on the top of the phone instead of the bottom. And Seek, because their app is the worst piece of garbage in the world, has no way of rotating the image, so it will always be upside down, which is annoying. But you could just turn the internal accelerometer off and then rotate the phone manually, and it won't rotate the app because it won't know what's going on. That's what I did, and it does work for that. It's not the fastest frame rate when you compare it to a much beefier phone, but it works quite well. I tried to use a USB DAC on this thing, just like I have my Audio Engine D3, and I tried to plug that in here, and unfortunately the processor is not fast enough to keep packets flowing to that, and it will cause sort of pops and cracks due to a firmware bug, or actually no, it's a hardware bug in the DAC that I'm using. So if you used another DAC, it would probably be okay. But it's definitely not the fastest USB host that you're ever going to see, but that sort of makes sense. And while I'm talking about audio, the internal audio, I sort of expected it to be shit because, I mean, it's analog, and whenever you deal with something super cheap, analog stuff, I mean, the quality of an analog signal is almost always dependent on how much money you put into the components. So, of course, with the cheapest possible components, I would have expected the analog audio to be terrible, but it's actually really good. I was very, very surprised at that. It's not as good as the multi-$100 DACs, but it is perfectly acceptable for use as, like an MP3 player, like a portable audio device. It is very good. It can drive relatively low impedance headphones. I tried this out with some 16 ohm impedance headphones, and they were fine. I tried this out with some 100 ohm headphones, and they were fine. It can drive a wide variety of things, and it can drive them to acceptable levels of loudness. And there's basically no hiss. There's the noise floor is very, very good. I was very surprised by that. So this it makes, if you throw in a 64 gig SD card, this thing becomes a really viable portable music device. So I thought I'd mention that. I was surprised by that. So one thing that I think a lot of people are definitely going to want to know about is the battery life of this thing. And so in my video about using AM radio to detect electromagnetic interference, I actually held a radio up to both of these phones, and I let you listen to the processor and how it does power management. And this thing wakes up the processor very frequently to do very small amounts of work. And that's the way it does its power management, which is different from all the other phones that I have. And the standby power on this thing is I think it's perfectly fine. It takes about 5 days to drain the battery in standby on this thing, which I think is perfectly acceptable. It's not as good as some of my other phones, which can go longer, but they have bigger batteries, and of course they have a lot more advanced software in them, so I think it's perfectly acceptable. What was really surprising, was the power consumption under load. So I got this phone right around, I got this phone quite a little bit before Pokemon Go, the whole Pokemon Go craze thing happened. So, of course, like everyone, I, of course, played it for a short period of time and then realized, what the hell am I doing? And so, of course, I was using my phone for this. And, I have an external battery pack with my phone, and that was what I was kind of going around with. And anyway, my friend, his phone died, so I let him borrow this. He put his SIM card in here, and he played Pokemon Go on this with his 4G SIM. And what was really interesting is we'd go out together, and both of these phones would be fully charged, and we'd leave the house without any power banks. And after about 2 hours of doing the exact same amount of work, my phone, which has a 3 amp hour battery, was down to about 20% battery left. And after the exact same amount of time, this phone was still at 65% battery. So it actually handled that quite well. And the reason for that is, I think, due to two things. The first one is the screen on this is lower resolution. It's easier to drive than the screen on my other phone. So the lower the resolution, the simpler the screen, you're going to get better battery life. But the other thing is the CPU and the GPU in this are much slower than a phone like this, which has 6 cores or at 2 point something gigahertz. This thing is, like I said, 4 cores at 1 gigahertz. It's a lot slower, and as long as it's fast enough to do what you want it to do, all the extra performance is really kind of just wasted because it'll just sort of churn at maximum CPU, and you're going to end up burning through a lot more power with a faster processor. So this thing actually did really, really well with those high drain gaming applications. The frame rate was, you could tell at certain times during big animations and stuff, it would lag a bit, but I think it's definitely playable. You can definitely play games on this kind of a phone. You can watch YouTube videos on this phone, all that stuff in 720 HD. They all work without any big issues. So as for the operating system in this phone, there's really nothing special to write home about. It's custom skinned Android. It has a few minor tweaks to it and custom features that I don't even think are really worth talking about. But it's fully featured. It has the Play Store, so it has Google Apps on it. So it's not like one of those Chinese phones that doesn't come with that. So you're forced to have to sideload that stuff manually. It supports Google out of the box, which is quite nice. I have actually gotten a software update on this phone since I bought it, so they are at least issuing over-the-air updates for this thing, which is nice. So I've had this for 4 months, and I have had one failure on this phone, and that is the SD card slot has failed. About 3 months in, the micro SD card was no longer detected, and no matter what I do, I cannot get it to see an SD card. So I'm now forced to use the internal storage. I did have a 64 gig SD card in here, and it doesn't recognize it or any other SD card now. So I did have a whole bunch of music on that. It now doesn't have anything on it. So I don't know if I got a dud, just something went wrong, or if that's sort of expected with the quality of these things. I don't know. I only have a sample size of 1, but I will let you know that there has been that failure. The other thing that I should mention is the screen on this phone has dirt in it, which again I don't think is common, because I've seen other people with these and no one else has complained about it. So I feel like I may have just had a bad one. But let me just navigate to something where I can show you, because it is definitely noticeable. Yeah, so if I just open up a white screen like this, and we'll see how well the camera picks this up, but you'll notice there are these little kind of black specks. Those black specks are not on the outside of the screen. They're actually in between the LCD and the front glass, or in this case plastic. So unfortunately I can't get those out unless I open the phone. So the UI is mostly black, so you can't actually see that under like normal operation, but it is there. So again, I don't think that's common, but I'll mention that. It's not that big a deal. You can rarely ever see them unless you're on a white page. But I kind of expected, I want to say expected more, but honestly I really had pretty low expectations, so whatever. So of course, using this as an MP3 player is a great use. If it's not going to be a phone, using it as a thermal camera viewer is a great use. The other thing that I really like about this kind of phone is, it has the front and the rear camera, it has the flash, and that means that I can use this as a security camera. So there is an app which is called IP Webcam, and this app basically allows you to turn any Android phone into an IP camera, and it's a great app. It works very, very well, and all you need to do is just pretty much put this somewhere, plug in the power lead, and point it at something, and then you can control the cameras, both of them. You can control the light. You can get it to automatically record motion, send the files to another server or whatever. And it's got its own battery backup, so if someone cuts the power, it still works. It's got its own internal memory, so if the network goes down, it's really, really good for a security camera. And most of the IP cameras that are under like $150 are completely garbage. I bought one which was a $75 security camera, and it didn't even work. It was like it self-bricked. It would reboot. It would actually lock up every 3 days, and I'd have to reboot it manually. It was just terrible. This thing is perfectly stable, and it costs less money, and it gives you all these other features. So that's actually what I'm using this for. It's actually being used for a security camera, and the footage isn't HD. Well, it's 720, but it's kind of like, what do you expect out of a security camera? It's not going to be the greatest thing, but it works really, really well for that. So that's what I'm doing with this phone anyway.